you've ever worked in graduate medical education for any length of time, you've probably experienced this feeling. You can clearly see that a process isn't working. You know where the bottlenecks are, where the pinch points are, and you might even have ideas for how to fix it. But you might feel like you're not necessarily the person with the title, the authority, or the positional power that makes the final decision. And you might even found yourself asking, is this really mine to fix? Or how do I improve something when I feel like I don't have that authority? This conversation is exactly for you because we're going to talk today about how you can be that person. So today we're welcoming a guest speaker. We have Nicole Losik Aguilar. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, thank you, Daphne and Julie and GME Compass. What a great platform that you guys are offering to our community. I'm so excited to be here. I've been a residency program manager for 5 years, and I've been in GME for almost 30, which is a big, scary number. So I've seen a lot of changes and a lot of things evolve through these years. So this is a really great topic to really hone in on for folks.
Yeah, and hi everyone. I'm Dafny Argueta. Nicole, we are actually very, very excited to have you here because your experience has been around process improvement, how to implement things, how to also strategize. And I think as a program coordinator, we have all felt the weight of knowing that there's an issue, knowing that what we're doing in our process is not really working. So definitely having your expertise and knowledge is so super helpful. And we're so excited to have you here.
So many of us spend our days managing tasks. We feel like we might be sending reminders, deadlines, following up on missing information, putting out fires, right? We feel like we put out a lot of fires, but sometimes it might feel like a people problem is actually a systems problem. So I feel like the first point of conversation that we want to have is the difference between keeping your work moving versus improving the process itself. Talking about the difference between managing your tasks versus fixing the systems that are affecting those tasks.
I'm just going to jump right in and share with you guys where I tend to, I think, over analyze some things. I'm using the word analyze, but I think I overthink certain things. And where my lines get blurred really easily is what is my task versus what is the system.
Yes.
I because I have to touch it and I experience it good or bad, or, it's something that's imperfect. I assume it's mine, and that's not always the case. And that's
I,
where we start, right? How when
Yeah.
with
I
that you
that,
cross that,
right?
like, how do you really start to identify what is yours?
Nicole, you make a great point. And I think especially if you're new into GME, everything does feel like these are all my responsibilities. To your point, you start seeing and start almost filtering out like, yes, this is a task that should fall under me, but I don't necessarily have to completely own it myself. And that takes time to be able to navigate.
And I think it's also we care so deeply about our roles, about our positions, about our programs, about our trainees. And I think if you are here, whether you're Nicole joining us as part of our Let's Talk and our discussion, or even if you're just here watching the videos, it's because you want to better yourself. You want to improve, which means you want perfection, you want growth, and you want that upward trajectory. It really is a personal feeling, right?
I think this topic we are talking about specifically, coordinating and GME, but this is a task that you can take on with you any element of your life. You're that PTA mom or dad or whatever, you're that church lady. We just take on those roles so heavily and identify, and it's because we want to make things better. So really trying to discern and differentiate what is yours.
It's funny that you said that, Nicole, because I feel like as GME professionals, it does go over into our personal how we actually manage our own lives in terms of managing your children and also those tasks and being able to delegate. As you were saying that, I was just thinking, of course, we as GME professionals, that's how we function
Yep.
professionally.
Same. I was thinking the same thing. As you were saying it, Nicole, I was like, I'm probably not a very good delegator because thinking about it, just going to practices, figuring out
Yep.
dinner, emptying the dishwasher, just things in your personal life, activities, like whether it's church, PTO, your children,
Yep.
your home, or your role, it's very easy to take that on yourself versus identifying what can you fix, what
Yes.
can you delegate, and what is emergent that you have to do in this moment.
Absolutely. As I was prepping a little bit for this, trying to figure out how do you do that? What do you guys think that should feel like? How would you identify what is your task versus what is a system situation? that's beyond you that you shouldn't own?
For me, I'm a checklist color code kind of girl. I totally am. I have in front of me my notebook. I have 2 chalkboards on my wall. One is
Yeah,
a
I would say like
calendar chalkboard and
Yeah.
one is a big one that I have my to do. I have let's talk, those types of things. And that allows me to take a bird's eye of one, get the things out of my head and onto a board or a paper or something like that. And I just feel better looking at all of the things in one place.
Yeah.
And then some days I might start with the low hanging fruit because I just feel like I need to, my personality needs to check a box. I need to feel like I've gotten something accomplished. And then some days I have the time, the bandwidth, the energy, or the need and priority to do something big that might be a huge task that is more of a systems task, but it helps me to look at everything so they don't all bubble up and then make me feel anxious.
I actually start looking at those things that I don't necessarily have to do. Like, could I follow up and make sure that X gets done? Yes, that gets done. And I think part of that is also as well as going into a new position and also having that transition of coordinator to now manager of yes, now every task does not belong to me. Do I have to have a pulse of where everything is? My mentality to that, or I've had a mind shift of that. I try to narrow down that list and then be able to, but again, your first instinct is to do that low hanging fruit, like, right? Because again, you want to have also to that sense of gratification that I actually did something today. Not only was I putting away fires, because again, we're always putting out fires, and sometimes we don't appreciate that that's also a task that we're doing on top of the other things. So what about you, Nicole?
Yeah.
So I really have an issue with my blurred lines a little and just naturally saying, oh, this is all mine, right? And we have our wonderful list and I've got 17 of them and all the places digitally on the post-its, papers, everywhere you can imagine. But what I have had to kind of change my style just to manage the workflow, just to manage myself or wellness.
Mhm.
I really had to say, okay, let me look at what this is and is this truly mine? And the kind of way I started asking some questions when it comes down to it. Really, who is the accountable person for this? Truly, what is the accountability factor? Is it me? Is it my institutional coordinator? Is it a GME department? Could it be actually put back on a resident or a fellow? Who owns this? Who should this really be coming from? I manage it, but managing is very different than ownership.
It's interesting too.
Testify.
Yeah.
That's interesting too, though, because it's like you're identifying your tasks and what is your responsibility versus your oversight. But when the system breaks down and the operational systems start to break down, that feeling that you might put on yourself of, oh my goodness, this is hitting the fan. I have to fix this, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting you said it's Julie, because we are part of that system. We're talking about ourselves as we're the task manager, we're trying to imagine the task, but we're also very much part of that system. And one thing that my PD would always say is you never want to have a single point of failure. That's kind of what happens when you then want everything like, yes, could I do everything? Could I make sure? Yes. But then realistically, am I able to manage? It's not that you can't do the task. Can you manage all the tasks and everything that comes with it? And when we hold on to everything and things like that, we become that single point of failure. Because then when you remove us, now everything crumbles. And that's not necessarily the goal or what you would want in your program. As important as we are, if we are not able to be there, the system should still run.
Yes.
I
And
feel like that what you just said there is the pearl in today's talk, right? I feel like that is your mic drop learning point moment of if you keep it to yourself and you don't communicate it, you don't delegate it, you don't identify it, we become the single point of the system's failure and
yeah.
keeping that in mind.
That it's true. I go at least once a week with I am not multitasking, I am multi-failing because it's impossible. So, and I don't want anyone to feel like a failure or think that mode at all because it's inevitable. When we wear that and we take on all of that, that's what really this is for. So we can have those small victories, have those big ones, and how do we improve our process of process improvement?
Even if we might have the idea or anything like that, but like sometimes we can't fix it. And being okay with that, having that insight to be okay with that, because we're just so passionate and we care so much about what we do that when you care about something so much, you want to do what's best for it. You want, and what you think what's best for it at that time is you. And sometimes it's not. Again, single point of failure.
And there's things out there in all of our environments that we're not privy to. As much as we know, we know a
Exactly.
lot. We're in the, we're in the trenches. However, there are policies, there are rules and regulations, there are things out there in our institution and outside in our specialties that we really don't know from a program director perspective, from a DIO perspective, from our funding perspectives. We're savvy on a lot, but there are certain things. So yes, if the no is no, if it's unfixable or it's not being changed or addressed, it isn't your failure. You've done your part. I will say, usually a situation that hasn't been resolved will keep on being an issue. So give it some time. Don't be afraid to revisit it in a few months with a different group of people
Hmm.
or a year, because it will resurrect itself. Or even crazier sounding, we did fix it and it gets broken again.
That's actually another great point. So we fixed it and now it's broken again.
Like,
And
well,
that can
okay,
very well happen. Things are also iterative, also thinking about the process improvement.
yeah, the process improvement.
The process, it is supposed to be iterative. It is iterative. It's also continuous. Some of the things that we're talking about are part of that system. It's not like a one thing, a one task. It's part of this bigger system where if there's one little breakdown in that system, then the whole thing goes. But now we either put a band-aid or we fix that one, and like now as we continue this, whoop, there's now another broken link, or another link has broken in the chain. And it seems like it's putting out fires, but essentially, you're trying to make changes and improvements to that system. So then less and less links break. But you can fix a system, or you thought you did. And
Yep.
then it comes back right back around. It's just like, well, this is not working. And if this is not working, now what do we do?
Yeah.
So I think that's exactly when you have a system, whether it's your team, exactly what Nicole was saying is it could be a financial decision, it could be a higher leadership decision, it could be an institutional decision that you might not know. And even when you're assuming good intent and you see the writing on the walls that a band-aid was put on a hemorrhage, right? Because what Daphne, I feel like, is saying, we all relate to, we're all chuckling, right? Right? We can all think of it happening when you have a hidden operational debt that was created instead of creating a sustainable solution for the breakdown in the system. And what do? Because a quick fix was put on something happens, and the here and now a decision needs to be made, and you make a quick fix, but now you're on to either the next emergency or
Thing,
the
yeah.
next month in the academic cycle, and now you were in a dip where you could focus, but next thing you know, you're back up in recruitment season or onboarding or something like that, and you blink.
Yep.
And now it's 6 months later, and you know what I'm saying, and now
Yeah.
you need to reuse the system that you never got to fix. It's kind of like not closing the loop. And that's one of like the biggest things that we do, is that we're supposed to end up closing these loops. And sometimes, to your point, Julie, because we don't necessarily always have the power to be able to close those loops, go back to it, because there are times where because again, we have the pulse on things, and although for our PDs and our faculty, we've had this conversation about, yes, we need to fix the system, but then they walk out the door. Now they got their patients, they got surgery, they're doing research, they're doing this. Next thing, they're trying to prepare for CCCs and stuff. And so they're like not even thinking about it anymore. But again, since we have it on the pulse, it's like on the forefront of our minds.
Yeah, the I mean, when we're on fire, right? That's it. You do
That's
that.
it. We put the quick fix,
You
and
put it
then we
on
can't.
there, and whether sometimes you don't have buy-in, sometimes we're just trying to get through, and it resurrects itself. And then once that happens, now you have, and then it's a rare, it's somebody, people say don't waste a good citation. I feel like, I guess,
Listen, like,
right? I feel like this is one of those moments or situations, whatever it is that, or process that it is, that you did the quick fix, you got through it. It was painful, I guarantee you. And then it resurrects itself. And now you have data, right? Now you have some of those elements that
mhm,
maybe, and now maybe you have time. Maybe you knew,
mhm.
okay, this season's coming up again. this scenario is coming up again next month. So it's going to be a fire, but you have a little bit more knowledge on how to try to deal with that situation. You can look at it in a very different perspective. And now that audience that you took it to that didn't
Weren't
get it done
listening then.
the right way or for a permanent fix, now is that opportunity. Like we had talked about, bringing it back around 6 months later to however that is. But that's, and quick fixes are literally that. They are temporary.
Love how you said that, essentially alluding that quick fixes, like in the beginning, like, okay, yes, we did it. They're actually a lot more work than
Mhm.
actually trying to fix the system, believe it or
Yes.
not.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to keep revisiting. It's kind of like you put the hole you've seen in the cartoons, like a spout, you put the
Yes.
hole here, you put the hole here. That's essentially what you're doing, but you're not looking underneath to see why are we having like all these holes. So at the end of the day, someone also told me, my old chief of podiatry, he used to say all the time too, when you buy something cheap, it actually ends up being more expensive. So it's kind of like the same thing. Or sometimes when you're working with program or when you're working in your program and you don't have everything and you're like, we're trying to revise all these things and PDs and faculty's like, oh, we don't have time for that, da da da. No, but if you made the time, because then what's going to end up coming up is that then something's going to happen where we're going to need either this document, this piece of evidence, this piece of data. And now, I'm saying now we're scrambling to get it. It ends up taking up actually more time, more energy, affects more of your mental health than mental status than if you were just to sit there and take some time shortly after. Because also too, one of the things that's in being able to address the system issues or once you put the
Mhm.
band-aid going on to the next step is like it's also fresh as to what it really is the issue. Because how many times have we then circled back about something 6 months later and not really even be sure what the initial problem was? Where was the breakdown? Because now we're trying to go back now and put all the pieces together because again, we
Yeah,
have moved on.
absolutely.
Exactly, and how you said purchasing something cheap creates something more expensive, right?
Mhm.
So you're creating an operational debt because
Mhm.
you're robbing Peter to pay for
Hey,
Paul.
Paul. Mhm.
Yep.
You're right? Is really what you're doing. So you're creating this operational debt instead of creating a sustainable fix, a
Yep.
sustainable solution that can now time after time fix itself. So you just exactly like the example you're saying, you just keep digging the hole.
Yeah.
But I also think, Nicole, like almost every person that we work with, they're scientists, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
The vast majority have a
Yep.
science background and therefore they have a data driven background.
Absolutely.
So exactly to your point, and even if it's not something like that is very easily data driven, even if it's not one of those cookie cutter evaluations or duty hours or something that's simple to get to the numbers, even if it is a fire that's a softer fire, so to speak, you still have data that it's repeatedly happening,
Yeah.
even if it's a communication or a professionalism or something like that. And you can take a look at it and figure out repeated pain points in the system that are
Mhm.
happening that you can now have a conversation with whatever that leadership space is, that there's a pattern now that is repeating. And how do we address the pattern?
And the
Mhm.
key and the thing with data, just a little, if anybody's taking notes, there's like two elements to that. It's not just the how many times the occurrence happened, but it's what has been the impact, whether it's a
Mm.
personal impact, whether it's to
Absolutely.
your program and your trainees, whether it, you want to take it, it does take time and you want to mark down how much time and resource was impacted. So when they're that's the kind of data that we can provide. If it costs
Mhm.
money, there's all these elements, not just a list of it happened on January, 1st. It
Mhm.
happened, we've had 17 incidences. They need a little bit more to that. And really, when you reflect back and say, PD, this is how it impacted you in your program.
Yes.
Institution, this is how it
Yes.
impacted you in the institution.
How did it affect the clinical learning environment? How
Yes.
did it affect the patient care unit? How
Yep.
did it affect the team that's taking care? At the end of the day, whatever your end result is, what was the impact of those things?
So when you're processing and doing this, like I said, we know we're on fire when we're on fire, so we don't have the time to do that. But when you have that opportunity and you got to go back and you're pulling all that information, those are those little things to highlight on what it is. And this kind of goes back. I have this little saying that I tell myself and other people all the time about tools. A tool is only as good to you as there's two things. You need to know where it is and you need to know how to use it.
Use it. Yes,
And
absolutely.
Yeah,
that's what that's what drives improvement
that's
is
really
finding.
great advice.
Yeah. It really, I mean, everything, not everything can be fixed all the time, but it just, what it also does for you as a program manager is it elevates your status.
Absolutely.
Status is a thing, and I use that word a little loosely, but when you're giving good information and communicating well, that's where you're going to build your reputation in this process.
And it's also a learning opportunity because the more
Yes.
you're looking at your data, the more that you're looking at your system, the more that you're learning about it.
Yep.
And then also now being able to provide feedback or things that can actually help improve or change the system if it's
Yep.
not working. To your point, Nicole, using that as an opportunity for yes, professional growth, because then also too, we don't have the power to actually wave a magic wand and actually change it, but
Yep.
what we do have the power to do is to make everyone that needs to be aware of what's going on, what is going on, where the breakdown in the system is, and what the solutions could possibly be. There's a lot of other pieces that sometimes where it's not so much that we're not privy to, but it's just like it's not just part of,
Mhm.
our role or what we're trying to resolve at that time, or sometimes it's bigger than it's in the institutional level. Some of these things is just how healthcare in general, the struggles and the challenges of healthcare, right? Because we're talking about graduate medical education, but a lot of the issues with the system really comes from the healthcare system itself. I mean, believe me, we know that there have been many faculty, that physicians in all different types of specialties in areas that have been trying to resolve a lot of those systems and a lot of those challenges as well. But again, like taking that opportunity for you to learn how to be able to then and then identify those, right? Because as you're learning, you're actually going to start being able to identify those, like maybe when there's a smoldering before you even
Yep.
see a little flame, you're like, hey, this is smoldering, and I think we need to keep an eye on it because this system is not really contributing to the success of this particular process.
Definitely.
It's important in the title of what we're talking about is process improvement when you're feeling like you don't have positional power, and
Mhm.
when you might allow yourself to feel like you don't have positional power. But why did we create GME Compass? Why are we here? To empower program managers and program coordinators to think and believe that they're leaders and they're part of the leadership team. And what you do have power to do is to communicate and to
Mhm.
think analytically and process your data, right?
Hmm.
Yep.
You always have power to do those things. And if you use those tools and you learn how to utilize those skills and foster them, you can do process improvement and make changes when you might feel like it's coming from a system that's far beyond where you're working day to day.
Absolutely. It's funny because, like I said, it kind of elevates your status when you come with good data and then they start to hear you. So now you become that process expert, right? You
Mhm.
become that. How does that impact, and you're learning all of that, and which feeds back right into aligning and improving for someone else's goals. We fix
Oh,
things because it's
hmm,
self-preservation.
Boom.
Keeps us well, right? It keeps
that's
us
the mic drop
going.
right there.
But
Yeah.
the reality is, align it with someone else's goals, because then it doesn't get turned into something else. It's not about Julie complaining or Nicole having a panic attack or Daphne getting ready to,
I'm
walk
walking out the
away.
door. Like I'm
Yeah.
I'm
done.
like, she kept that in her back pocket as we're talking about shifting communication, the way that people receive it, and having conversation about the clinical learning it. That's powerful, right?
Yeah.
No, that's actually it's again, I think that that's actually the mic drop from like if you
Yeah.
were to take anything away from this let's talk, it's definitely that, Nicole.
Those are excellent take homes and really great advice. I think sustainable improvement rarely comes from working harder. It comes from building and improving your systems. I think it's an excellent note for us to close on. Thank you so much for joining us during our Let's Talk conversation. And I
Thank
think
you.
it would be great. This is a great segue to inspire our audience to think about what processes in your program that might have become significantly better because
Mhm.
someone was willing to challenge that status quo and challenge the fires that are coming across their desk to think about how they can improve and change the bigger system that's behind it. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.